There's a structure underneath every conversation you've ever had. You didn't see it. Most people never do. But it was there, organized, intentional, operating beneath the surface of words and eye contact and tone of voice. A framework so embedded in human interaction that its absence would feel stranger than its presence. You've been navigating it your entire life without knowing its name or its rules or the precise moments it was used against you. This is not about manipulation in the dramatic sense. It's not about con artists or cult leaders, though they understand it better than most. It's about something quieter, something that moves through ordinary conversations, professional environments, intimate relationships, and public spaces without ever announcing itself. 'Tis the invisible architecture behind every persuasion attempt, and once you learn to see it, you will never unsee it. Every persuasion attempt, every one begins before a single word is spoken. This is the part that most people miss because they're waiting for the argument. They're preparing their counterpoints, calibrating their skepticism, deciding in advance what they will and won't believe. But the operator, the person who understands influence at the structural level, isn't starting with the argument. They're starting with the environment, with the conditions, with the psychological terrain they're about to move through. Before any ask is made, before any idea is introduced, someone who understands persuasion architecture is already building the room that the conversation will live inside. They're managing attention. They're establishing the emotional baseline. They're making quiet decisions about pace and proximity and the sequencing of information. You think the persuasion starts when they open their mouth. It started long before that. The first structural element is what behavioral scientists call frame control, and it is the foundation everything else is built on. A frame is not an argument. It is the context that determines how an argument will be received. It is the lens through which information gets processed before conscious evaluation even begins. Whoever sets the frame first holds enormous power, because every response that follows happens inside that frame, including disagreement, resistance, and what feels like independent thought. Think about the last time someone came to you and said, "I just want to be honest with you." Notice what that phrase does. Before a single piece of content has been delivered, the frame has been set. What's coming is honesty, and your reception of it becomes a test of your maturity. If you push back, you're not disagreeing with information. You're resisting honesty. The frame made that true before the conversation began. This is frame architecture. It's not deceptive in the theatrical sense. It's structural, and every interaction you participate in has one. The second element is emotional priming, and this is where it becomes personal. The human nervous system does not process information neutrally. It processes it emotionally first, and rationally second. This is not a flaw. 'Tis the architecture of a survival system that had to make decisions faster than conscious thought allowed. But it means that whoever reaches the emotional system first has already shaped how the logical system will respond. This emotional priming happens through tone, through story, through the careful selection of which emotional register is activated before the core message arrives. An idea introduced through story lives in a different part of the brain than the same idea introduced through data. The operators who understand this aren't manipulating emotion. They're navigating the actual architecture of how human beings receive information. When someone tells you a story before making an ask, that story is not decoration. It is structural. It is preparing the emotional environment so that what follows lands in the right register. You feel moved, then you feel the request, and the two become entangled in a way that rational analysis can't cleanly separate. That's not a coincidence. That's craft. The third structural layer is social proof, but not the version you've been taught. Most people understand social proof at the surface level. They know that testimonials and crowd behavior, and the phrase most people choose, are influence tools. What they don't understand is the deeper mechanism. Social proof works because the human brain is a pattern recognition system that is wired to use other humans as data. Not because people are mindless followers. It's because in genuinely uncertain conditions, observing what other agents do is one of the most reliable ways to navigate the unknown. The operator exploits this by manufacturing certainty where none exists, by presenting the behavior of a select group as the behavior of the norm, by implying consensus before consensus has formed. When someone says, "Everyone I talk to is doing X," that statement is not a report. It is an installation. It is placing a reference group in your mind that will now function as a standard against which your own position is measured. You didn't agree to use that reference group. It was given to you. And now it's inside the frame, next to the primed emotional state, and the architecture is almost complete. The fourth element is scarcity, and it operates on something much deeper than logic. Scarcity is not about supply and demand. That's the economic translation. The psychological mechanism is about a much older fear, the fear of being left behind, of arriving after the moment has passed, of existing on the outside of something that others got to experience. It's not the resource you're afraid of losing. It's the identity that comes with having it. When someone introduces scarcity into a conversation, whether it's time, access, opportunity, or attention, they are not giving you information about availability. They are activating a specific threat response that compresses the space between consideration and commitment. The window for careful evaluation narrows. The question shifts from, "Is this the right decision?" to, "Can I afford to wait?" That shift is not accidental. It is engineered. The most sophisticated deployment of scarcity isn't dramatic. It doesn't look like a countdown timer or a high-pressure close. It looks like a quiet implication. A window of access that is casually mentioned and then moved past. It's the subtler the pressure, the less the conscious mind registers it as pressure at all. The fifth element is the one that holds all the others together, and it is the least visible of all. It is called commitment and coherence, and it is the mechanism that makes a person become the instrument of their own persuasion. Once a person has made a small, voluntary commitment, agreed to something minor, expressed a preference, stated a position out loud, they become psychologically invested in remaining consistent with that position. It's not because they are weak, because consistency is how identity maintains coherence. So the brain will work to protect what the self has already claimed. So the operator who understands this does not make the large ask first. They make the small ask. They create the micro-agreement. They ask a question they already know the answer to, and when you answer it, you have just handed them the first brick of the architecture they are about to build inside your own mind. Every commitment that follows is built on the last one. By the time the actual ask arrives, you are not being persuaded from the outside. You are being guided toward a conclusion that your own prior agreements have already made internally consistent. This is the part that unsettles people the most when they first see it clearly. The realization that the most effective persuasion doesn't push, it leads. It creates conditions where the subject persuades themselves, using the architecture the operator has quietly constructed around them. What you now understand is not a list of tactics. It is a system. Its frame, emotional priming, social proof, scarcity, commitment, and coherence. The T's. These 5 elements don't operate in sequence, they operate in layers, simultaneously, each one reinforcing the others in ways that make the total influence greater than the sum of its parts. You cannot simply identify one element and neutralize the rest. The architecture is designed to be self-reinforcing, to feel like the natural flow of a conversation rather than the deliberate execution of a framework. This is why most people don't see it. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't feel coercive. It feels like connection, like conversation, like the organic movement of two minds finding agreement. And that feeling of natural flow, is often the clearest sign that the architecture is working exactly as designed. The question that people arrive at when they understand this for the first time is almost always the same one. They ask, so does this mean every conversation is a manipulation? Does this mean that everyone I trust has been using this on me? And the honest answer is, not intentionally, and not always. Much of what gets deployed in everyday persuasion is instinctive. People who are naturally influential are often operating from learned patterns rather than studied frameworks. They've discovered what works through trial and feedback, not through doctrine. They don't have a name for what they do. Do it. But intention does not change the effect. The architecture functions whether or not the operator can describe it. And your vulnerability to it does not depend on the other person's awareness. It depends on yours. There is a specific kind of calm that develops in people who have spent serious time studying the architecture of influence. It is not cynicism. Cynicism is a wound that presents itself as wisdom. What develops in this serious student of behavioral architecture is something quieter, a kind of perceptual fluency. The ability to be inside a conversation and simultaneously read the structural layer beneath it, to feel the frame being set and choose whether to enter it, to notice the emotional priming and decide whether to allow it to run, to recognize the micro-commitment being constructed and make a conscious decision about whether to place that first brick. This is not detachment. It is not the cold removal of someone who has decided people can't be trusted. It is the opposite. It is the capacity to be fully present in an interaction while maintaining access to a part of the mind. It is watching the architecture in real time. The part that sees the room being built while the conversation is still happening. Its capacity changes everything. It's not because it makes you immune. No one is immune, but because awareness interrupts automaticity. It's when you can see the structure. You get to choose your relationship to it. This is the beginning of what we teach inside the influence underground. Not manipulation as a weapon. It's not persuasion as a parlor trick. It's the deep structural literacy that allows you to move through human interaction with both the warmth of genuine connection and the perceptual clarity of someone who understands what's actually happening beneath it. They are not contradictory capabilities. They are complementary ones, and they are learnable. The invisible architecture has always been there, in every conversation, every negotiation, every relationship, every environment designed to move you from one position to another. The only question is whether you are reading it or being read by it. The link is below. Curriculum is waiting.